and he built the bedroom around the living tree and cut the trunk down to a post and made the bed frame from it. The bed is rooted in the ground. Nobody could move it without cutting through a tree. "Who moved my bed?" he demands. "Who cut it? Has someone been in this room?" And Penelope's knees go weak, and she runs to him and puts her arms around his neck. Because only 2 people alive knew that. And also, look at what he revealed by shouting. She didn't just test his memory. She tested his jealousy, and she got it. She caught him the way he catches everyone. And she is the only character in the entire poem who ever does. Homer then compares her relief to the joy of a drowning swimmer who sees land, using, for her, the shipwreck image that has belonged to him for 10 years, 20 years apart, and the poet gives them the same metaphor. They match. And Athena, quietly, holds back the dawn to make the night longer for them. That's the ending, not the killing, that. Except it isn't quite the ending. There's a final book, some ancient scholars thought it was a later edition, in which the families of the dead suitors come for revenge, and Odysseus fights beside his aged father Laertes, and Athena stops the war and imposes a peace and wipes the memory of the grief away. That's how it closes, not with victory, but with an amnesty. But I promised you Tiresias's other prophecy, down in the dark, and here it is. The prophet told him, "Even after you come home, even after you kill them all, you must go out again. Take an oar on your shoulder and walk inland, away from the sea, and keep walking until you come to a people who know nothing of the sea, who have never seen a ship, who don't put salt in their food. And you'll know you've arrived when a stranger you pass on the road asks you why you're carrying a winnowing fan on your shoulder. Because that's what an oar looks like to someone who's never seen the ocean, a farming tool for tossing grain into the wind. And there plant the oar in the ground and make a sacrifice to Poseidon and go home. And then, Tiresias says, death will come for you from the sea very gently when you are old and comfortable, surrounded by a prosperous people. Think about what that means. The curse ends when he walks so far inland that the sea becomes meaningless. When he stands somewhere, his entire identity, his whole 20-year ordeal, is unrecognizable. And someone looks at the symbol of his life and sees a garden implement. Odysseus finally makes peace with the sea by finding people who have never heard of it. The poem doesn't show us that journey, it just tells us it's coming. Homer ends the Odyssey with an unwalked road, and we've been staring down it for 3,000 years. Historian's hat on, let's be careful. Troy is real. That much is settled. For most of the modern era, scholars regarded the whole thing as fable, until in the 1870s, a wealthy German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann started digging at a mound in northwestern Anatolia called Hisarlik, in what is today Çanakkale province, Turkey. And he found a city. In fact, he found several, stacked on top of one another, at least 9 major settlement layers spanning more than 3,000 years. Schliemann, it must be said, was a terrible archaeologist. He drove a trench straight through the mound in his hurry to reach the bottom, destroying enormous quantities of exactly the layers that mattered, and he had a tendency to announce discoveries in ways that flattered his own legend. But he was right about the fundamental thing. There was a city there, at the mouth of the Dardanelles, in exactly the position the poems describe, controlling access to the Black Sea. The layer that interests us is called Troy 6, and its successor Troy 7a. Troy 6 was a substantial fortified citadel with sloping walls and towers, considerably grander than the small hilltop fort earlier scholars imagined, and geophysical surveys since the 1990s have shown a large lower town beyond the citadel, which changes the picture again. This was a real city of possibly several thousand people. Troy 7a, occupied in the 13th to 12th centuries BCE, shows signs of siege, cramped housing, storage jars sunk into floors, and then a destruction layer with fire damage, unburied skeletons, and sling bullets. Something violent happened there at roughly the right time. That is as far as the spade can take us, the Hittites. Here's where it gets interesting. And this is genuinely one of my favorite things in ancient history. The Hittite Empire, based in central Anatolia, kept diplomatic archives. And in those archives we find a place called Wilusa, which most linguists accept as the Hittite form of Ilios, the other Greek name for Troy. We find a treaty with a king of Wilusa named Alexandru, and Paris, Prince of Troy, has a second name in Homer, Alexandros. And we find repeated references to a troublesome power across the sea called Ahiawa, which is very plausibly the Hittite rendering of Achaia, Homer's word for the Greeks. The Hittite texts describe Ahiawan meddling, raiding, and territorial disputes on the Anatolian coast over generations. So we have documentary evidence of Bronze Age Greeks fighting over a place called Wilusa, not a wooden horse, not Helen. But the shape of the thing, Greeks and Anatolians in conflict over that specific city, appears in someone else's filing cabinet, the collapse. And then, around 1200 BCE, that entire world ends. Not just Troy. Everything. The Hittite capital burns. The Mycenaean palaces burn, or are abandoned. Egypt is attacked by a coalition its records call the Sea Peoples. Trade routes shut down. And in Greece, writing itself is forgotten. Linear B vanishes for 400 years. Nobody fully agrees on the cause. Drought, earthquake, migration, systems collapse, the failure of the long-distance tin trade that bronze depended on. Probably all of them compounding. That gap is called the Greek Dark Age, and it is essential to understanding this poem because Homer is standing on the far side of it, looking back. Homer. The poems as we have them were probably fixed in something like their current form in the 8th century BCE. That's around 750 to 700, some 400 to 500 years after the events they describe. Whether Homer was one person, two, or a tradition is a debate that will outlive all of us. But we do know how the poems were made, and this is one of the great detective stories of modern scholarship. In the 1930s, an American scholar named Milman Parry noticed that Homeric verse is built out of repeating prefabricated phrases: the wine dark sea, rosy-fingered dawn, grey-eyed Athena, each metrically shaped to slot into a particular position in the line. Then he and Albert Lord went to what was then Yugoslavia and recorded living illiterate bards performing epic songs of thousands of lines and found they worked exactly the same way, not memorizing, but composing in performance from a toolkit of formulas. So the Odyssey is not a book someone wrote. It is the frozen recording of a performance tradition, a song sung and resung for centuries and only late in its life committed to writing, which explains why the poem's world is a jumble. The material culture in it mixes Bronze Age details the singers preserved almost fossil-like, boars' tusk helmets, tower shields, bronze weapons, with Iron Age details from the singer's own time. It's a palimpsest, a memory of a memory of a memory, revised by every mouth it passed through. And Ithaca? Honestly, it's a mess. The island now called Ithaca doesn't fit Homer's geographic description very well. He calls the hero's island low-lying and westernmost, which Ithaca isn't. There have been serious proposals that Homeric Ithaca is actually part of neighboring Kephallonia, whose Peliki Peninsula may once have been separated by a channel that later filled in. The geological work is contested. It may never be resolved. Which is, I think, appropriate. The one island in this story you can't quite locate on a map is the one that mattered most. So why this one? Why, of all the stories, has this one refused to die? Achilles is unreachable. He's the best there has ever been at killing. He's half divine, and he dies young. There's nothing in him to hold on to. Odysseus is us. He's middle-aged, he's tired, he is often frightened and says so. He cries constantly, genuinely. Count the tears in this poem. He weeps more than any other Greek hero. He makes catastrophic errors out of vanity and pays for them for a decade. He lies to nearly everyone he loves, including his father, for reasons that are never quite as necessary as he claims. He is unfaithful and comes home to a wife who was not. And yet. He is offered eternal life and turns it down for a rocky island with bad soil. He crawls back into his own house as a beggar to be spat on rather than lose the advantage. He holds a knife to the throat of the woman who raised him and weeps for a dying dog in the same afternoon. He is not admirable. He is recognizable. And the thing he wants, the thing he burns 20 years and 600 lives to get, is not a throne or glory or a god's favor. It's a specific room with a bed in it that's built into a tree, and a woman in that room who is as clever as he is, and outside an old man in a garden and a dog by the gate. Every single one of us knows what that is. That's the whole trick. Homer took the most extravagant fantasy imaginable, witches, giants, the underworld, the winds in a bag, and used it all in service of the smallest and most ordinary human wish there is. To go home, and to be recognized when you get there. Thank you for listening. If you want more of this, the next episode is